My name is Nila and I have a background in teaching. I was principal of a small school for some years. I was involved in Rudolf Steiner education for many years, and I started the Steiner School in Cairns in far north Australia. So I've had a lot of different kinds of teaching experiences. In terms of my spiritual journey, I think it was round about the age of 11 that from time to time I started having experiences that certainly didn't fit the reality that I was being taught about in school, and that made me realize that there was a lot more to life. And I developed an absolute passion to explore the question, who am I? Why am I here? What is this earth experience all about? And synchronicity led me to a Sufi master in Java, and he taught a meditation practice which was based very much on intuition, on surrender, and on trust, and that if we would just surrender to what he called Allah, but what we can call the universe, God, the source, things would start to change and things would start to open up in our lives. And I found that to be very true. And over the next, I guess almost 40 years, I kept up my spiritual practices, and I found that from time to time I would have extraordinary experiences that were very transformative. In 2018, I had a year that was the most challenging, the most difficult, the most wonderful, the most magical year of my life, and it introduced me to another way of operating spiritually in the world that really, again, changed my life in another new way. I was shown that we are sent down to earth with two wings to help us to fly. And the first wing is the wing of the mind, the intellect, that part of us that can solve problems in the material, physical world. And we are also sent down with an inner guidance system that is all-knowing and that has a far broader grasp of what's going on and the purpose of what's going on in our lives than our intellect does. And I'm calling that intuition, but I'm sure there are many other words you could give for it. Inner guidance, whatever. I was made aware that modern humans are very unbalanced. If you look at it, we spend 12 or more years developing the intellect, and not 1 minute is given to developing the intuition. And because of that, we often end up suffering unnecessarily, making missteps in our lives, because we're not in touch, or we're not using, or we're not developing that faculty that we've been given to help us on the journey. So let me tell you a little bit about what happened to me in 2018. On New Year's Day in 2018, I started to get intuitive indications that I had a challenging year ahead of me. The indications were coming in various different ways, and you can read about the details in my book if you would like. But I didn't want to hear, I didn't want to acknowledge. I just thought that, you know, with the power of positive thinking, I would have a great year and everything would be fine. But of course, the universe never lies, and in its wisdom and compassion, it was trying to prepare me. and I had been told that I was going to have a challenge around health. When I got to about March, I noticed that I was starting to get tired sometimes, and sometimes I would need to have a little afternoon rest. And I just put it down to getting older, and that, you know, this was normal. And I didn't connect it up with anything to do with these intuitive indications that I had been getting. Then I got to early April, and it was around Easter time, and I decided I would go on a retreat, and I chose a Taizé style retreat. I don't know if any of you are aware of that, but it's a sort of retreat that's based on chanting, on silence and candlelight. It's very beautiful, and it evokes the spirit of Easter for me. So on the second day of the retreat, we were in the chapel, and everybody commented on the fact that there was a very strong presence in the chapel that night. And I felt two presences. One was beaming down a golden light, and the other was beaming down a rose-colored light. They were there blessing and helping everyone. And I suddenly noticed that something unusual was happening. Often in my meditation, I would feel energy rising up inside or energy descending down. But this was very unusual because I felt this energy coming from these beings, and it was being focused into my right chest area. And my right breast, my right chest was getting hotter and hotter. And as these rays were coming down, my ear was getting so hot that it felt like it was on fire. And I thought, this is very unusual. I wonder what's going on. But I mean, unusual things happen, I'm sure, in all of our lives. And so I just said, thank you. That's another divine mystery. I wrote it in my spiritual journal, and I didn't think anything more of it. But of course, it was another piece in the jigsaw. After Easter, when our family time had finished, the bomb was dropped in my life. I was walking across my lounge room one day, and all of a sudden I heard a voice, and I got a message that said, go and get a mammogram. Now, I'm hopeless about mammograms. I hadn't had one in 6, maybe 7 years. But because this had come intuitively, I absolutely fully intended to go and get the mammogram. But I got busy that day and distracted, and by the time I went to bed that night, I had completely forgotten the message. So the next day, again, I was walking across my lounge room, and the message came back, but this time the voice was booming and communicated far more authority and force. And it said, go now and arrange a mammogram. So I was taken quite aback with the force of it all. I went straight and got the old-fashioned phone book, looked up breast screen, which is our free national screening program, made an appointment, and then I lay down on the bed and I thought, well, I better do a breast self-examination. This is something that I rarely, if ever, do, which is very naughty, but I'm just not that tuned into the body. And I couldn't feel a lump. I couldn't feel any soreness. I couldn't feel anything that seemed different to me. So I had in the back of my mind now a question: do I have breast cancer? Now, I don't know about you, but I certainly know for myself that if I have a genuine and sincere question that needs an answer, the universe will always provide an answer. It's just that I have to be watchful and observe, because the language of the universe is completely different from human language, And that answer can come in so many different ways and forms. The next day when I got up, I had a strong feeling, again, intuitive feeling, that I should pack a lunch, I should go up to my favorite beach, I should ask for an answer at the beach, and I would be given an answer in a sign. So I made a sandwich, I threw a towel in my car, I drove up to the beach and I spread the towel out, and it was an exquisitely beautiful day. The water was as still as a mill pond. There was no one else on the beach but me, and the sun was sparkling on the waves, and it was very, very captivating and very, very peaceful. And as I was sitting on the beach looking at the scene, I began musing to myself and wondering how the universe was going to present me with the answer that I needed on this beach. And I looked down to take another bite of my sandwich, and I suddenly noticed that by chance I had put my towel down on a part of the beach where there was a crab hole right next to my left knee, and there was a little crab outside her hole, and she was absolutely staring at me. And this feeling came over me that always comes over me when I know a message is coming through. I knew she was a messenger. And just as the ancients, the tribal people, the Celts, used to read the signs in nature, I knew that I was about to be given one of those sorts of signs. So when she knew that she had my full attention, she disappeared down into her hole, and she came back up again, and her pincers were absolutely full of sand, and she flung the sand as far away from her hole as she could. And she looked back at me very intently, as if to say, "Do you get it?" I knew there was a message there, but of course, initially I didn't get it. I'm very slow to read signs. So I sat there and I mulled on it, and gradually the message started to come into stark focus for me. She was removing something that shouldn't be in her house. She was flinging it as far away from her as she possibly could. Another part of the message, which I only discovered when a friend pointed it out for me, is that the crab is the astrological sign of Cancer. So again, that was another dimension of the message. I knew when I left that beach that I was not going to be getting the all clear from my mammogram. And when I was on the beach, I was also given another message, and through nature, and another few messages around animals that you can read about in the book. I won't go into today. But when I left the beach, I knew I wouldn't get the all clear, and I also knew that I was going to be supported. And what then started was an extraordinary cancer journey where I never felt fear because I was never alone. I had my earthly doctors, and I had this spiritual team, as well as my intuition that was connecting in to all of this help and guidance. And the whole way there were signs, there were synchronicities, there were dream messages, there were visions, visitations. Every step of the way, I was shown how we were going to be doing this journey together and how I would be helped. I would never be alone. And because of that, people would come up to me and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that you've been diagnosed with breast cancer." And I'd be saying to myself, "Don't be sorry. This is the most extraordinary experience I'm having. And I know that we can all do challenges like this, but we just have to unfold that part of ourselves that we, as a society, as a planet, we have not yet given the honouring to that we give to the intellect. I'm not going to tell you any more about my journey. Again, it's in the book, but I would like to take us forward to the end, in which I knew that my intuition had quite literally saved my life. And when I finished my treatment, I had no intention of writing a book. But the universe had very different ideas. And about 6 to 8 weeks after I finished my treatments, I was in the shower one day. It was an ordinary day like any other, and I looked across to the window in the bathroom, and there was a steam cloud. And in the midst of the steam cloud, I suddenly saw a blue light. It was a physical, present blue light. It was not inside me, although sometimes I see a blue light internally, but this was in the room. And I blinked and blinked a number of times, and I thought, you know, what is this? What am I seeing? And I was looking around to see if it had been triggered by some other source, and there was no source for this blue light. The next thing that happened was that this blue light would suddenly appear around the house, in random places and at random times. And I would think to myself, well, you know, what is this all about? If I went to other places, the blue light would sometimes appear as well. So again, I had another question that the universe needed to answer for me, and that was, what is this blue light? So one morning at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was suddenly woken up with another message. And I was told that the blue light was my guide waiting to work with me. And I thought, okay, I can relate to guides. I can relate to help. I've been getting a lot of it lately. So I wonder what work it is that we're meant to be doing. And all of a sudden, I started getting downloads. And that was followed up by a whole lot of synchronicities. Again, you can read the details in the book if you'd like. And by about day 10 of this process, I realized that I had to write a book about my experience with cancer, and that I had to expose myself to the whole world, which is something that I had absolutely no intention of doing. But I was meant to be doing this, and I was meant to be doing it because there was a broader message that was meant to be presented, not just by me, but by lots of people in our modern times, because now is the time of change, the time of shifting. I was shown the very, very deep, profound love that surrounds every single one of us when we come down into this earth journey. And I was also shown that the universe, God, source, higher self, however you like to picture that, is there wanting to accompany us and guide us on our earth journey, so that we don't have to suffer unnecessarily, and so that we can take the path that's intended for us, that's meant for us. But it can't do that. We open up and seek a response. And finally, unless we begin to really pay attention and learn the language of heaven, we speak with words, but heaven speaks in multiple ways, some of which I'm sure you're very well aware of in your own intuitive experiences. You know, we can get guidance through messages, through signs, through symbols, through synchronicities, dreams, all kinds of phenomena like my blue light, presences, through another person, through blockages in our lives or flow in our lives, visions, visitations, things that are out of the ordinary, but we suddenly think, whoa, what's that all about? Our hunches, our gut feelings, insightful flashes where we just suddenly know something, and so on and so forth. And again, in the book, I've listed and talked about a number of different forms in which the universe will speak to us. But we have to develop this faculty, this understanding of the language, just as we learn to read and write our mother tongue in school. And now is the time, I was told, that this needs to happen, and that there'll be a big planetary shift when more and more of us are being guided more and more fully and deeply by that inner knowledge, that inner sense, that heart center that we all have. So what is intuition? It's a word that has two words within it, in and tuition. So it's this inner, internal tuition, teaching or teacher that wants to guide us if we will listen and watch. And in my experience, there are two forms of intuition. One is what I call spontaneous intuition. It's the kind of intuition that's unexpected and it's initiated by heaven. So my mammogram messages were spontaneous intuition. I had no idea that I needed to go and get a mammogram, but my intuition knew and heaven knew. So spontaneous intuition is one form, and the other form of it is what I call responsorial intuition. That's when we ask a question, we put it out to the universe, and we await and watch the signs, the language, and wait for the response that inevitably will come if we have that faith and trust in the process. So intuition is a very, very powerful and as yet underutilized tool by human beings. And I'm just going to share with you a small quote from the book that I found interesting, because there are other people who are also speaking about the importance of intuition. So I'll just read you this little section. There is a palliative care doctor called John Lerner who spent long hours at the bedside of people in the final hours of life. In his book, Learning from the Light, he describes an encounter with one particular patient. 3 hours before her death, she opened her eyes and told him that she had been with the angels. The angels informed her that if humans would only listen to their intuition, then their lives would rapidly improve. She also said that this would happen eventually on Earth, as it was part of our destiny. When the Earth hits a critical mass of people working from the intuitive heart rather than the analytical head, then the whole world will change. There will be a seismic shift. And I think that we can all see the problems that we've created for ourselves, other people, and the planet from only operating from the intellect and the analytical mind and not dipping into the intuitive wisdom of the heart. Our whole planet is out of balance, and now is the time when we need to rebalance it. So I'm going to, I think there was one thing I missed out, and I didn't tell you about when the blue light told me to write the book. I was going to mention this to you. When I was told to write the book, I had absolutely no idea how I was going to get 50,000 words written about my cancer journey. And I was shown eventually that it was going to be in two parts. The first part was about my journey, and the second part was going to be about the power of intuition in everybody's lives. And the book would also include a few introductory exercises for people to try out in starting to develop their intuition. But on the first day when I sat down to write the book, on my monitor, the blue light suddenly appeared. And on the second day, when I sat down to write the book, the blue light appeared on my keyboard. And from then on, every time when I sat down to write, I would feel this presence beside me or behind me. And when I was stuck on something, there was always the next guidance that would come to show me how I was to put this book together, and that, yes, we would get a book out of this together, even though I thought this was an impossible task. So if you would like to buy a copy of my book, this is my copy that's ready for talks and presentations. It's called The Gift of Intuition, Guidance on a Healing Journey, and it will be available for release next Monday week, the 16th of September it comes out. It'll be available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and I know it will be on Book Depository, but I'm not sure if that will be Monday week. But if you would like, I'd love you to read it, and if you like it, I'd love you to write up a review so that my team and I, can get this message out that's meant to get out. So I'd just like to finish by sharing with you a couple of quotes. The first one comes from Proust. He says, "The path to wisdom is not in seeing new vistas, but in having new eyes." And the other one comes from William Blake. "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would be seen as it really is, infinite." And I honestly believe it's because we are infinitely connected to all that is, and that we are not separate from anything else. That's why we can get this knowing, we can get guidance for our life, because it's there in the whole of the universe. It's there, and we just have to open those channels and tap in far more than we currently do as human beings.